At 3:14 a.m., my garage exploded into flames, and in under 8 minutes, everything I spent 15 years building was reduced to ash. My tools, my workshop, my vintage Mustang I rebuilt piece by piece after work every night. Gone. The fire chief called it an accident. My security cameras told a very different story. Across the street, my HOA president stood watching the fire with a calm smile, like she was waiting for the ending she'd already planned. What she didn't know was that 6 hours later, she'd be standing in a courtroom, realizing the man she tried to destroy was the judge about to decide her fate. Stay with me, because what happened next turned suburban harassment into federal prison time. At 3:14 a.m., my garage was swallowed by fire. By the time I ran outside barefoot, smoke burning my throat and cold sweat clinging to my skin, everything I had built over 15 years was already crashing down. My workshop, my tools, my pride and joy, a vintage Mustang I restored one bolt at a time after work every night. Gone in less than 8 minutes. The fire chief said it was electrical. My security camera said it was arson. Across the street, HOA President Delilah Harrington stood in her robe with her arms crossed, watching the flames like she was enjoying a late-night TV show. No shock, no panic, just a calm, satisfied look. Later that same afternoon, she walked into a courthouse for her arraignment, confident and smirking, fully convinced she had won. The clerk called the case. Delilah finally looked up at the bench, and all the color drained from her face. Stay with me, because what happened next forced the woman who burned my life down to beg for mercy from the one man she never expected to face. My name is Marcus Thornfield, and 6 months earlier, I was just a newly appointed municipal judge, trying to rebuild my life after a painful divorce. At 52, after 15 years as a public defender, I thought I had seen every ugly side of the legal system. I was wrong. I had just bought a house in Willowbrook Estates, and before you imagine some luxury mansion, stop right there. Willowbrook was a row of overpriced cookie-cutter homes with fancy street names like Manor Way and Estate Drive, the kind of place where people lease cars they can't afford and act like they invented suburbia. I chose the house for one reason, the huge garage. It was perfect for my weekend hobbies, classic car restoration and woodworking. After years of apartment living, unloading my table saw while breathing in fresh autumn air mixed with sawdust felt like freedom. That peace lasted exactly 3 days. On day 3, as I was setting up my workshop, I heard the sound of authority approaching. You know the sound. The click-click-click of acrylic nails on a clipboard, paired with a smile sharp enough to cut glass. "Welcome to Willowbrook. I'm Delilah Harrington, HOA President," she said. "You'll want to review our community standards before you settle in."
She was 47, a former real estate agent who had lost her license over what she called misunderstandings, but what sounded like fraud to anyone with legal experience. She handed me a 47-page document highlighted like a law student's textbook. Pages 23 through 31 were marked heavily: garage use, noise rules, and acceptable vehicles. Then came the sound that would haunt me for months, the snap of her phone camera. She was already taking pictures. My garage, my car, my mailbox, everything. The papers felt expensive but weak, all style and no substance. I had dealt with worse in court, so I didn't worry. That was mistake number 1. "I'm sure in your previous neighborhood, these rules were different," she said, pausing just long enough to insult me. "But property values matter here." That pause told me everything. This wasn't about rules, it was about control. I calmly explained that my 1967 Mustang was registered, insured, and covered. My workshop was inside the garage, and I only worked during approved hours. A reasonable answer. But Delilah smiled like she had already decided the outcome.
"Oh, you're one of those homeowners," she said sweetly. "Well, Mr. Thornfield, we have ways of keeping standards." As she walked away in her expensive heels, still snapping photos, I noticed how carefully she documented everything, like she was building a case. I should have listened to my instincts. But after years defending real criminals, I thought I could handle one suburban tyrant with a clipboard. I was wrong.
Delilah Harrington wasn't just power-hungry, she was dangerous, smart enough to plan, desperate enough to act. That night, sitting peacefully in my garage with a wood plane in my hands, I had no idea I was stepping into a 3-year war that would end with federal charges, insurance fraud, and the most satisfying moment of my career. 2 weeks later, the harassment started. Violation letter number 1 arrived on fancy letterhead. Unauthorized storage of a non-street legal vehicle. My Mustang was fully legal. I could have driven it to the HOA office. Instead, I responded with documents, registration, insurance, photos, timestamps, organized like a federal filing. Delilah didn't back down. She scheduled a compliance inspection and brought backup. Her neighbor, Patricia, who looked uncomfortable, and her brother-in-law, Randy, who claimed to work in property management. They measured everything: grass height, mailbox color, doormat material. Randy literally used a ruler on my lawn. Patricia kept clearing her throat, clearly disagreeing but too afraid to speak. They focused heavily on my garage, fire safety, electrical systems, questions no HOA had authority to ask. 2 weeks later came violation letter number 2, unauthorized structural modifications. I spent a weekend pulling city permits. Turns out the previous owner had approved everything years earlier. I sent Delilah copies and politely reminded her that filing false building violations was a misdemeanor. Her reply came within 24 hours, angry, rushed, emotional. "The board will increase inspections due to your confrontational attitude." Confrontational meant standing up for myself. That night, sharpening my tools felt different. This wasn't a hobby anymore. It was preparation. Soon she escalated. Noise complaints. Officer Rodriguez responded every time, apologetic. My sound levels were legal. He quietly told me repeated false reports could get the caller fined. Then came daily photos, 14 times in a week, always legal, always creepy. At a neighborhood barbecue, I overheard her real reason. "People like him think they can move in and change things. His kind doesn't belong."
Patricia later confirmed it. Delilah treated white families gently, others got threats. Violation letter number 3 accused me of running a business. The language was copied from a commercial HOA in another state. She hadn't even tried to hide it. I responded with a detailed legal breakdown. Her reply was handwritten, emotional. She mentioned my profession. That made it personal and illegal. Then all 4 of my tires were mysteriously flat. Her measuring my driveway again wasn't random. She was planning something physical. When I reviewed footage, my stomach dropped. She had focused on my electrical panel. This wasn't harassment anymore. It was planning. Months later, I uncovered the real plan, an insurance policy on common areas that covered damage to nearby structures, like my garage. She planned to burn it, claim electrical failure, collect money, and erase evidence. Emails confirmed it. Purchases of wiring, practice tampering at the mailbox. This was arson, federal arson. Instead of stopping her, I documented everything. I worked with police, a surveyor, and fire investigators. Cameras were installed, evidence prepared. I staged a fake camping trip. She watched me leave. At 12:47 a.m., she and Randy moved. Cameras captured everything: tools, tampering, accelerant. A timer was set for 3:30 a.m. At 3:25, smoke started. At 3:26, firefighters moved in. The fire was stopped instantly. Randy was arrested at the box. Delilah drove to the scene and walked into the investigation. Search warrants revealed everything. At 2 p.m. that day, I sat on the bench. Court is now in session. The Honorable Judge Marcus Thornfield presiding. Delilah looked up and collapsed. She realized her victim was her judge. Federal charges followed. 12 years for her, 8 for Randy. The garage stands today. The Mustang is restored. The neighborhood healed. This is HOA Prime Stories. If you've faced HOA abuse, share your story. Like, comment, and subscribe. Sometimes justice doesn't just win. Sometimes it sits behind the bench. If this story shocked you, angered you, or made you cheer when justice finally hit back, you're not alone. HOA Prime Stories is where abusive HOA leaders, power-hungry board members, and neighborhood tyrants finally meet consequences. If you've ever dealt with unfair fines, harassment, or intimidation, share your story in the comments. Your voice matters. Like the video if you believe bullies shouldn't hide behind clipboards, and subscribe so you don't miss the next HOA nightmare that ends exactly the way it should. Justice doesn't always come fast, but when it does, it hits hard.